I know that's exactly what your point has been. Yeah, thanks for your money, but I don't want it. I don't want your money.
There seems to be a lack of appreciation or understanding of how's your week?
You know, I am swamped. I don't know why. We need to hire another person. Time to do all this volunteer stuff. That company's operating over there, I don't even know what the hell they're doing anymore. Got 2 new districts, like, what?
When I left the crate and the parts of my stuff, like, well, one of them's from Winter and loves to see stuff. I don't know if you know that. And the other one is just stuck to one layer. Extraordinarily slow. When I left, so the marketing person do her work.
She's on the phone, on a conference call. And got this woman that's been working on it for like 20 years. So it's just like, oh, God. He goes walking. Oh, yeah, then she came back, right before I came over, she came back and said, I don't think you should be signing that. Do I need to do a presentation of the board report?
I'm sorry?
Do I do a presentation of the board report?
No.
Okay, good,
That's what we did when we started putting it into the.
good.
Going to call to session. I can't tell from here. I'm either 50 seconds late over there or I'm 15 seconds early on my watch. Time is apparently a very fluid kind of thing these days. So thank you all for coming. We do have a quorum. And let's do a quick round of introductions. Jim Moore, at large.
Kevin Walker, at large.
Jessica McMullen, PPACG.
David Walker, City Manager. Vince Rosenek, at large.
Julie Ott, legal and voters.
Bob Baker, El Paso County, has been.
Sharon Brown, City of Aubrey Day, at large.
Welling Clark, Kono, Council of Neighbors and Organizations. Sorry.
Hal Moffett, El Paso County.
Our guest, Rocky Scott, who we'll hear more from in a moment.
Michelle Day, at large.
And back in the
Rick Sonnenberg, Acting Executive Director, PPACG.
and our staff support. Okay, thank you all very much. We have the consent agenda or consent items in front of us. Any comments or questions about that before we?
Just
Okay, I'll accept.
one question.
I'm sorry.
Well, one question.
Yes.
And this has to do with the board report. You know, on the second page, it talks about a new national Space Defense Center's coming into Schriever. Is that a new facility and staffing? Or are they moving people around there?
No, they're bringing in it will be new construction, but they're bringing them in early. But they will be construction dollars coming in 2019, 2020.
Wow. Did they also address the increased traffic flow in and out? Because it's a real mess during rush hour.
They usually do that almost every meeting. So I think that if it wasn't, it was just, it was just an assertion on their part. So
Okay. That's good to hear.
it was stipulated. That's what I was looking for.
The CAC report that you gave,
Huh?
I would probably, between was and boring, I put the word very.
Or change the was to is, right? I do that every so often just to see if anybody reads these things, right?
Well, and I do want to thank Kevin for covering in my absence for that meeting, and appreciate it very much. Any other comments, good, informed, or otherwise? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the consent items. We have a second. We have a motion by Sharon, and Julie is the second. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of departing brethren, and they are brethren this time. Vince, would you please come forward? I have a certificate for you, sir. And everybody knows how you have really been a motivating force for us this year to examine who we are and what we're doing. So we appreciate that. And it's a piece of paper that can go with a lot of the other pieces of paper that you've got over the years. But we do appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
And wish you the very best. Sorry that you're stepping off this year, but these things happen.
Got it.
Thanks.
All right.
Mr. Baker, best dressed man in the room.
Most comfortable.
Thereabouts.
Oh, man.
I've known Bob, God, I don't know how long you'd want to admit it. Probably 20 minutes.
We are longer in the tooth, I can assure you.
Well, yes, we had much shorter teeth a long time ago. But anyway, Bob, you did serve us as the chair for a period of time and did an excellent job at that. I would say I very much appreciated your informed questions. I feel that they're the standard that we all kind of need to be held to, and appreciate that very much. This says some of the same things that it says on Vince's certificate for some strange reason. But we do appreciate it on behalf of the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments and the CAC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. And hope things continue to go.
You know, I'd just like to say that with the turnover that we have had, I'm really impressed with what you've done with the board, the people on it, the skills and the talent that you have in the room, and also the staff. I see a bunch of young, energetic, and engaged people. The disappointment that I have is that I know too much now about the discrepancy between need and resources in our state. And it is, it's daunting is what it is. Yeah.
Well, we may hear some more about that shortly. Rick, did you have something you would like to say?
Please,
Oh, please, all right.
just a couple words. Again, Rick Sonnenberg, Acting Executive Director, PPACG. I just wanted to say on behalf of the PPACG Board, thank you to you gentlemen and to all of you in the room for your volunteer service. I've heard over the months, and particularly even this morning, from the PPACG Board Chair, Andy Pico, that the board values your input and your volunteer time for your recommendations and advice to the Board of Directors, and representing all facets of the general community. And he was speaking on behalf of the full board that they value your service. So particularly the two of you who are leaving, thank you so much for your service, and thank you to the rest for your ongoing service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it very much. To introduce our guest speaker, I'll turn things over to Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've known Rocky Scott for a very long time, and have always been impressed with a couple of things. One, he's really smart, for one, and second, he's just really committed to making places better. And he did a lot of that in the late 80s, early 90s, early 2000s, middle 2000s, late 2000s, and all the way up to today when he is now serving our community once again in the role of the State Highway Transportation Commissioner. And it's just an honor to have worked with him and to watch him work, and to learn a little bit about what it takes to be committed and to make things happen in the community. And so, but today we're not going to give him an award. We are going to though. That's right. Listen to a little bit about those needs and resources, and have him tell us a little bit about what the State Highway Commission does, what the challenges are there, and try to answer questions that we might have. So, Rocky, appreciate your service and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Walter. It's interesting reflecting on what's just within the last couple of minutes. So Box is reading it now and knows so much. Still burdened with knowledge problem.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. You do get burdened with knowledge in the sense that it's not okay to sit back when important things are going on. And what Rick was just mentioning about Andy Pico's comment, I asked him this morning. I said, "So I'm going to be spending some time with the CAC this afternoon. What is a role of CAC? How do you see it?" And he says, "Well, PPACG board probably wouldn't do anything significant if it didn't think that the CAC was supportive." So the trust that's been built here, I don't know how that was done, but it was obviously done effectively, and you're playing an important role. So I'm, as Kevin mentioned, I'm your commissioner for, this is District 9, and I started that process in November. I asked Kevin to answer, just sort of pose some questions, and I will list these and think about these because I'll hit each one of them, and then if there's anything else on your mind in this 30 minutes, let me know, and because I'd like to go where you want to go more than where I want to go. Kevin was mentioning, talk about the role of the commission in funding decisions, talk about the need for a statewide view, about the overall funding situation, the role of the MPAs, and specifically PPACG, and the status of the GAP project, and Cimarron and the like, and I'd add Colorado 21, which is Powers Boulevard, on there because I had some recent opportunity to learn about that. But let me add first to what is the commission. When Dirk asked me if I'd be interested in being on the commission, my first answer was I don't really know what the commission does, and so I can't answer that question. But and I asked for a few days, and I've known some commissioners in the past just from wandering around the state doing economic development things, and I always respected, quite frankly, the passion that they brought to their roles. And I think it has a lot to do with what Bob was mentioning, is the more you learn about it, the more committed you are to trying to make things right. But the commission is, I believe, a product of, much like the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, which I worked with quite a bit in my ED role in the past, sort of the legislature's way of saying, we clearly can't manage this process of funding a huge state agency by negotiating how funding priorities ought to be done at the state in the hallways of the Capitol or in committees. That's just not a practical way to do it. So let's assemble some people who can devote their time to that issue. And so there, if you go to the statutes, actually there's been a transportation commission with a different role since 1910. but the legislature very formally empowered the commission as it exists today to basically be the organization that oversees the way that funding is allocated in the state for state highway system. It is the prioritizer. And it has some authority over the budget of CDOT, the department, the staff, and the way some of the work that the staff, the way the work is done by the staff. To a large extent, in my experience so far at least, the commissioner reports to the governor, or the executive director, reports to the governor a lot more than he does to the commission for obvious reasons. So there are 11 of us on the commission. I have four counties: El Paso, Teller, Fremont, I always forget and Park, which is somewhat diverse, but it's fascinating to go up to Fairplay and sit in on what are the issues in Park County. And of the 11 commissioners, I will tell you there's not a one that isn't the operating style, for which the operating style is not a very collegial, let's get it done together approach, which is not to say that the commissioners don't advocate for their own projects in their own areas, but they understand that you have one of 11 votes, and if you show up thinking it's going to be all about you, you can be sure of only one thing, and that is it will not be all about you. I mean, we work together towards an end. And so one of the key reasons for that, which is something that Kevin asked about, is this recognition that, I was trained as an engineer and had a lot of experience in my first career doing systems level work, a recognition that the state highway system is truly a system. It's not a collection of pieces. The furniture delivered to your house came over the statewide system through a couple of other regions at least. The food that's delivered to the grocery store, the emergency vehicles that respond to the needs of people we care about travel over state highways. The way we live, the quality of our life and our ability to have a functioning economy depends upon a statewide system. And so that creates some interesting dilemmas, because that would suggest that all of our decisions are based upon a statewide view and prioritizing on a statewide view. But as a practical matter, a lot of elected officials are involved appropriately in the process, and they care about what their constituents care about, and the constituents don't really care that much about what's happening in Eagle, Colorado, that they know about. And so there's this interesting prioritization balance, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, in how and how funding priorities are established. So let me jump into, actually let me back up for just one second. When, just before the meeting, Jim came over and he said, we're trying something different. We're going to try to learn a lot more, and I love to hear that. And because I have some homework for you guys. and I'm only partially jesting. Because what I have found, and again, I apologize for this tangent for the moment, and I'll get back to where I was, but what I have found is that the CDOT website has an enormous amount of extremely valuable information. If you're into this transportation stuff, they do a really good job of hiding most of it. And I say to them, I say lovingly, you guys are all engineers and you communicate like engineers, and therefore, as long as you know it, nobody else really needs to know it, right? Well, yeah, they do. So I'm actually going to pass this stuff around. I asked it to be returned, but you'll know that these papers all came off of the website. But things as simple as, which is one of the questions from Kevin, so how do projects get selected? There are not a lot of people in the state who even know how that. You guys probably know more about it than 98% of the rest of the world. But there's that one. There's the overall transportation planning process. We were talking earlier, Vince and I, about acronyms, and the source, the mother of all acronyms, I think, in the state could very well be CDOT, with STICs and TDPs and SWPs and RTPs and DAFs and who knows what. There's a list of those if you really care. This is an interesting topic, express lanes. So as we go about answering how do we fund things question, a very frequent comment out of El Paso County is, no tolling here. Well, the rest of the state is tolling. And there are reasons for that, and so that's available. What is a STIP? And again, you guys know that, but a lot don't. I don't necessarily suggest, as I pass these around, that these are things that you need to pick up and learn, but as the people you interact with, your constituents, as it were, because most of you are representing somebody, have questions about how some of these things occur, I'd recommend that you either have access to these or point people to them so that they can become informed. At the end of the day, in a Tabor world, I submit, the funding solution will not come from the public that isn't better educated than it is today about the options. There is not a good understanding of the options. And we'll talk about that again in a moment. The Commission's role is in statutes, CRS 43-1-106. If you really have a bad case of insomnia, you can dig into that one. And then there's some glossy stuff, which is hidden up in Denver at headquarters. RoadX, if you're interested in transportation technology issues, and I'm on this committee, and I love it. A little bit more on technology. How many of you are interested in HPTE and how we fund highways through bonding? Without HPTE, we wouldn't be doing a lot of things that we're doing right now. We wouldn't be doing the C470 C470 improvements, which are essential. We wouldn't be doing the Central 470, which is the improvements right near the stockyards in Denver, which are essential. And I just dug this one up at the last meeting. I asked Herman, so where can I learn more about the history of the commission and about Colorado transportation? Well, it turns out that this was done on the 100th anniversary, about 2010, of the commission, and they've got boxes and boxes of these at CDOT, but everybody forgot they're there. So I want you to know that they're there, and I encourage you to call up there someday if you have an interest in picking one up. And then lastly, this is not a CDOT project, but it's one that came through here, and it was a temporary flash of this information, and then it went away. But this is an organization called TRIP that did some analysis on the effectiveness of our transportation system now. That's the education part, and I'll just leave that to you. Let's go back to funding. And a lot of this I think you already know. If you go back to when Tom Norton was the CDOT director, which was about 25 years ago. How many of you remember Tom? State Senate President, CDOT Director, now Mayor of Greeley. And back then he said, CDOT, we've just completed our assessment of needs, and we have a $30 billion need over 30 years. We're short $1 billion a year, uninflated. And now when you hear Shailen Bhatt describe the problem, he says, we've got a $20 billion problem over 20 years. It's the same number. We're short $1 billion a year.
We saved $10 billion.
We,
Later.
Oh, okay.
I never thought of it that way, Kevin. But the problem hasn't changed. And if you look, going back to the issue of education, if you look at all of the noise that's been made this year about funding transportation, the very best option that we were seeing, which was House Bill 1242, was maybe $3.5 billion, generate the revenue out of a sales tax for $3.5 billion to be spent over 20 years. 3.5 divided by 20 is not 1, and therefore the gap is enormous. If you look at all of the different measures that are going through the legislature, Terry Carver, as you know, had a bill, and the idea was let's take unspecified money out of the general fund and do a transbond too. Again, it would have been small. And the part that was awkwardly not discussed was you can't just say take the money and bond on it. You have to identify where the money is going to come from. And the only discretionary parts of the state budget, quite frankly, at this point are primarily education. And education polls higher than transportation with the public. So that would be DOA on the ballot. Today, what's remaining as potential options for this year, there were, I think, 7 different titles that ran through the title board that have been approved. Two of them came out of the Independence Institute, John Caldera, and they're both called Fix Our Damn Roads. And it's basically the Terry Carver bill that says, let's go out and get a revenue source from the state. The legislators are required to pull it out of the existing budget. We'll build some projects by doing some bonding, and the number is still a relatively small number, going back to the billion a year problem, and once again doesn't specify. So I see the education community killing that if it goes to the ballot. House Bill 267, or Senate Bill 267 did pass. And in reality, and I don't think most people did the math, but it was really a victory for the governor in taking the hospital provider fee out of the Tabor formula so that there'd be a higher spending cap. But in reality, this so-called $1.88 billion that's going to go into transportation, if you take $50 million out of the CDOT budget, which is the maintenance budget, and bond that over the 23 years, I think it is, you've reached about $1.1 billion. If you take the 1.88, take out 10% transit, 30% for rurals, we're really right where we started, except that we're forcibly taking $50 million a year out of maintenance and putting it into bonding. So we really made no material progress with Senate Bill 267. All of the celebration was quite premature. So we still have a big gap to fill. I've been talking to my colleagues in Northern Colorado. Actually, I did last week. Their assessment is, and they've actually been spending a lot more time in this over the last 6 or 7 years than we have, but their assessment is that neither of the ballot approaches will be successful, and what we need to be focusing on is the 2018 session to see what we can get done then. So quite frankly, my effort these days is being spent on what might that look like and who needs to come together to make it happen. I think the legislature, not unlike the Congress, is ideologically unable to come to consensus on this question of the money is already there, just take it out of the budget, which is the Senate Republican side, or that we need new revenue so that we don't hurt education, which is on the House side. I think at the end of the day that will only be solved at the ballot box and probably only through a petition. That's just my personal assessment. It'd be great if the legislature could come to an agreement, and I think that's our first attempt that we ought to be making is to find some way to get the consensus through some combination of all the things that have been tried in the past. Gas tax, but for those of you who get my little newsletter, the current estimate is within 8 years, electric cars will be cheaper than cars with gas cars. So gas tax goes away. And the public doesn't at the moment like gas tax. The registration fees are not entirely popular, but other states have increased those. An increase in the sales tax, as you know, is not supported by the municipalities for obvious reasons, particularly here with the RTA. That's a challenge. So we're trying to come up with new ideas, and hopefully we'll get that done. It's still very murky. The role of the MPOs and the PPACG, every one of those documents that you see that talks about how projects are selected starts here. It starts at the MPO TPR. It's a bottoms-up process. This isn't a few people in a small room in Denver saying, this is what we want to build. If a project isn't endorsed at the local level, then it's just not going to happen. So that's the detail. The gap status, frankly, no money, no project. I think we know that. I think out of that $1.8 billion as the commission over the next few months, and it's going to take several months to sort it out because the money won't flow from 267 until next summer, there will be some of that which will be allocated to the gap, but nowhere close to the 400 million that's required to complete it. So let me leave it at that for Q&A, because I think I've come close to burning out most of my time, and see where you want to go.
Question, go ahead, Vince.
You didn't talk about rail. I think rail and vehicle transportation are part of transportation. Does that, you include rail in your?
I think all mobility options should be considered. At the moment, if you could only buy one thing at the moment, you have to have asphalt, because that's how trucks get from the factory to the house. Rail's pretty hard, right, because you got that last mile problem. So the asphalt part has to work to some level, and at the moment, we're not finding that. The studies that have been done so far, and you know this as well or better than I do, say that the most likely route to be successful for rail, for front range rail, would be here to Denver. It would probably pay its operating costs, but it wouldn't pay its original construction costs. So as you and I were just discussing, you know, the question is, where's the money? And when you're having a hard time just covering your asphalt needs through all the different machinations of how you make that as efficient as possible, electric cars, self-driving cars, metering the ramps, you know, sort of dynamic metering of the ramps, as you point out, it doesn't matter. Time goes on, and that all begins to congeal too. So rail always has to be an option. It's as we go back to the 2000s, when we all thought we were rich before 2008, and we thought it'd be an option, you know, hopefully a near-term option. It's still a huge challenge, but I think we have to be thinking about it.
So you were on a commission just recently. The governor signed that bill.
I had to get off that commission, because what I learned when I went up to Denver is I said, is this okay? Because it was a surprise. And they said, you may end up with a conflict, so I withdrew.
Can you talk about that program? Who's going to go on it? Basically, we're looking.
Well, Jill Gabler is now the PPACG appointee to that commission.
So it's really passenger rail between Pueblo and Denver through Colorado Springs, and trying to tie the two Amtraks together, the northern and the southern one, and maybe saving Amtrak in Pueblo area.
I think those are all good. I think we also know one of the realities of rail is the fixed investment is so high, you need a lot of population density to make it work. And Colorado, thank goodness, doesn't have the population density of Japan or the East Coast of the U.S. So lots of moving parts.
Okay, Bob.
Rocky, reflecting on your background, southern Colorado and northern Colorado, and dealing with the feelings probably in both of those markets that there's been a lack of parity as far as funding for projects in southern Colorado and northern Colorado. And the next thing is that given our population size here in El Paso County, just reflecting on El Paso County, we have very few state highway lane miles by comparison to some of our more remote neighbors. And I'm also very aware of the progress made on our major roadways in Colorado Springs over the last 5 years. I mean, we've had some huge projects that we have gotten done, primarily state highways and obviously interstate projects. But my question comes down to, you're one of 11 commissioners, and do you harbor any of those feelings of lack of parity in Colorado Springs
I really
or
don't.
Fort Collins?
I'm actually looking for it, because, as you can imagine, that's a not uncommonly held perception. But going back to this issue of emphasis on a statewide system, one of the challenges is how do you define equity? Because if it's purely a population-based allocation, you'd never put any money outside of the Front Range, and certainly not very much outside of Colorado Springs to Denver. So what is the appropriate allocation? And the less we do to maintain those outstate roads, the faster that burden grows. And so so let me tie in the current funding discussions. We met last week as a commission. We talked about this process of at least deciding what to do about 267, but I think it applies to any new funding that comes along, and how do we prioritize. And what I've asked, and the commission is pretty strongly supportive of the notion that before we talk about project list, we need to talk about criteria for selection. That's more transparent. Because the last time I got involved with CDAT, I kept asking, what are your criteria for selection? And I got this mumbo jumbo, and I was always uncomfortable with that, which made me suspicious. But I haven't, frankly, Bob, not that I'm come to a complete conclusion, but I haven't seen evidence yet that there's an inappropriate allocation. If you were to, there's a lot of interesting ways to measure this. What are the deaths per mile of state highway, and you put your money, where you've seen major problems with congestion and injury. Do you do it on population? I don't know. But I don't think the answer. I can't give you a definitive yes, no answer, but I can tell you I have the same question, but I haven't seen any evidence yet.
Audrey?
You brought up this idea of a more informed public,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to legislative issues, and I agree and think it may be even more important at the local level.
Yes.
My question about this is sort of consistent with whose job is it to do that? And where is it appropriate for that information to be coming from? Who should be informing?
Well, I think it's everybody's job. But if you look at organizations, PPACG has a role. The city has a role. I mean, every government agency has some kind of a role because everybody has to speak about their own need and the extent to which it is or is not being satisfied or won't be satisfied. Part of the reason why I think it's important for a lot of voices to be out there is in the absence of hearing anything, the tendency is to move towards complacency. Right? I mean, I haven't been in an accident recently, and nobody in my family has, and so it must not be that bad. Well, if you look at the fact that there's a 500,000 population expected in the next 20 years between here and Denver, the thought of even 3 lanes, but certainly the 2 lanes that we have. I drive up back and forth a lot, have family up in Denver, I have a couple of grandkids, and last week, at least twice, there were backups that were 5 miles or more. And, one of the discussions we had over breakfast is you don't understand, I'll put my economic development hat on, if we want headquarters companies in Colorado Springs, which we always said we do, they want access to an international airport. We sold 3M when they came to town, what is now the Colorado Crossings project up north. That was originally a 3M or intended R&D production site. They were not going to select a place that they didn't think they were within 45 minutes to an hour from an international airport. So we talked them into that site. Today, if they get any basic understanding, you can't reliably catch a flight at DIA from here in an hour. Now, you could say it's good for the Colorado Springs airport because now more people will fly over here, but we're never going to have. It's inconceivable that within our lifetimes there will be nonstop flights to international destinations. So maybe more tourist traffic. But I think those linkages, those system linkages, economic development and the like, are really important. And if Doug Price talks about that, and the city government talks about it, county talks about it, hopefully when people go to the ballot box, if there's a proposal that makes sense, they'll support it. Because as I started out with, I don't think there's a solution outside of the ballot box.
Al, and then Kevin.
I don't want to bore everyone else in the room, I've got a particular pet peeve around set-asides for non-motorized transportation. In that, well, one of the bills that got defeated this last session had a 30% set aside for a very large tax increase, specifically to non-motorized. To me, non-motorized does not include electric vehicles. I think it's bicycles. And bicycles do not, in my opinion, have a viable future outside of very level geography, which a very large percentage of, like just looking at Colorado Springs. You may have 50% of the city core is nice and level, and bicycles make sense for some transportation needs, but elsewhere it's really for individuals who want to enjoy their exercise while they move around. Is there any sort of a set-aside similar to that in, what is it, 267?
10% to transit, 30% to rural. Those are the only set-asides.
Okay.
Well, just to clarify, sorry, it's 30% to multimodal, not to non-motorized.
Multimodal.
Which is a big difference.
Yeah, but it, at least the way I read it, it looked like it was heavily oriented towards.
Multimodal was not defined in the statute language, however.
But it does include transit.
It does include transit. And obviously, there's discussion on the commission now about that very issue. You also have Colorado weather. I mean, you have bike lanes in Florida or Southern California that are going to be used a heck of a lot more than bike lanes in Colorado.
My son lives at the top of Research Boulevard, and they put in bike lane. They took a 3-lane road to 2 lanes. They put paint down. It lasted 3 weeks in the uproar. Then they came back and whatever the process is for taking off the top layer of asphalt so they could get rid of the paint. Yes, I know they're going to repave the whole thing, but it was a whole exercise in kind of futility. And when, in my opinion, when things are so tight for our transportation budgets to meet the vast majority of the needs, putting too much emphasis into bicycles, non-motorized, to me just kind of causes more issues than it solves.
There are strong voices at the table.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, there are strong voices at the table that share your point of view.
That's my opinion.
Kevin, wrap this up.
Rocky, I have a question for you. You've worked around the state and you worked around the country, and you're now working up in Denver representing us. What can we do? What do we do well in this region to represent our interests at the state or with CDOT, and what could we do better as a community to help you get your job done? Which is to get us more roads, by the way.
Well, one we touched upon, and that is just communicating and getting a much broader degree of understanding, I think, in the public. Every time I get involved in a conversation like this, it's the old engineer in me that says, so what are the root causes of the behavior you want to happen or not happen? Because without starting with that cause of root understanding, you can spin your wheels doing a lot of stuff that doesn't matter. And when it comes to raising money to deal with transportation of any mode, the root action that's going to be taken is somebody's going to do something in a ballot box that's going to result in a 50% plus one vote to put money into mobility. And if that doesn't happen, there won't be mobility. And it's not like there won't be, it's not like there's a status quo mobility. There won't be a decline in mobility. So that communication thing, I think, is absolutely essential. I think PPACG is on the right path in getting to the point where I will tell you that Northern Colorado got about 7 years ahead of us because they were looking forward to the I-25 problem and organized to deal with it. We, to be frank, PPACG board did not even identify the GAP project as a priority until December of last year. So up in Denver, what you'd hear from a lot of people is, you guys are making a lot of noise, but you haven't even said you care in a formal way. And going back to this notion that every project has to have the local support. Without that kind of an emphasis, it wasn't going to happen. But I think, let's communicate, let's think system-wide, and when I say communicate, I think we need to be measuring the public's attitude about this, because it's not going to change overnight, and right now it doesn't support funding mobility.
You went up and worked up in northern Colorado. When did you go there?
05?
Yeah, about 10 years ago, and there is a relationship by the fact that you went up there 10 years ago, and 7 years ago they were paying attention. And so we are now paying attention, and we appreciate your efforts to help us.
I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Rocky, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. I don't know if we've got everything. Is there still something hanging?
Oh, sorry. I got hung up on me.
Trying to hold on.
There's extras up there. I could go up there and get some,
Good to
right?
see you. Just two thoughts occurred to me. Number one, I think that's exactly the kind of thing that we need to be doing. We'll be trying to do it at least 2 out of every 3 meetings going forward, as we've got other things that come along that are major time sorts. But I think that's the kind of opening to increased education and awareness that I appreciate a great deal, and appreciate your all's support for that. The second thing is, one of my takeaways from this is the need to keep looking out. That there was a phrase in one of the documents that he passed around that said something, we're trying to solve 21st century problems with 20th century solutions. There are times I think it's 19th century solutions, but that's a different matter entirely. I would encourage you, I think we have an obligation to become more engaged with our relative constituencies and try to identify some more of these things. So I'll look forward to that as we have our conversations going forward. Okay, Ms. Valentine, you are on. This is my favorite topic, by the way. Or one of my favorites.
Okay, good afternoon. Jennifer Valentine. I'm a transportation planner with PPACG. So just a little bit of context, because for some of you, maybe this seems like it's coming out of nowhere. So at the end of last year, if you recall, we brought the schedule and proposed framework or methodology for the long-range plan through both of our committees, including this one, and then the board approved it in December. And so part of that framework was our planning horizon, which up to now has been 2050. Well, so staff internally over the past few months have just been having conversations about, does it really make sense to do 2050? And sort of the reasons started mounting, and those are the ones that I've summarized in this memo. So I'm just going to quickly go over them. So first box to check is that a planning horizon, as we're proposing, of 2045 would meet federal requirements. So the federal code says that your long-range transportation plan has to extend out at least 20 years. So that would be, if it's approved in 19, that would be 39. So 45 is okay. I'm going to skip to the third one quickly. So the Colorado statewide transportation plan that they're working on now, their planning horizon is 2045. So just for the sake of consistency, 2045 for us would work well. And then probably the biggest one is that, so CDOT does revenue projections, and the set that they're working on right now also extends out to 2045. So if we were to use 2050 as our planning horizon, it would be up to staff to extrapolate out 5 additional years. And we felt like there's enough uncertainty already in our plan without trying to go beyond what CDOT is forecasting. And we use those numbers to come up with that fiscally constrained list of projects. So we only plan for as many projects in the long-range plan as CDOT says that there's going to be money for. So I think those are the main things. So at this point, staff and TAC are recommending this change, and we're bringing it to you to see what you think.
Any questions for Jennifer?
if we drop that down, and it makes sense to have plans line up, so you don't have to do extra work, what does this do to the PPACG staff and everything? Does it compress anything or cause something to get pushed back, drop off the plate?
No, so like I said, we've been talking about this for a few months. The main thing we wanted to do was get through our first public involvement push with the goals, so it wouldn't be confusing for people. We would, get through that, and before we do the next big push, which is our scenarios, coming in early to mid-June, we were going to try and sneak in this change for staff. The thing that I'm working on right now is a small area forecast, and we do it in 5-year increments. So I've already started doing some of the preliminary runs, but you basically just chop 5 years off the end. So it's not any extra work for us. It's early enough that it's okay.
Yes,
We approve the recommendation.
we have a motion. Second. A second. Any further questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Good, I don't have to wonder about that dang question.
Okay, Jessica McMullen, the Policy and Communications Manager and your CAC staff member. I'm coming before you with an incredibly controversial issue. And I need you all to take it very seriously.
I move we approve Jessica's motion to extend Jim's term.
Second.
One of you has to call the vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Nice.
All opposed? Thank you.
I know that was challenging. So the second part of that is that
Save time.
we will have an at-large vacancy because people are leaving us, which means I need some of you to volunteer to interview at-large applicants. The side point of this that is not in your agenda is that means you all need to be talking to people that they need to be applying. So if you're not spreading the word that we have an at-large vacancy because Vince is leaving us, you should be doing that, and I can resend out the how to apply. Okay.
Yeah, please.
But I need volunteers to be that nominating committee and interview
Have we
committee.
heard from anybody that might be interested at this stage?
We have not yet received any applicants.
Okay.
I will, typically what we have tried to do is schedule those interviews right before the CAC meeting. So the June CAC meeting, we'd try to get together an hour beforehand and do all those interviews so that I'm not taking too much extra of all of your time for whoever selects that nominating committee, although that can be changed by the committee, obviously.
Okay, the second question is, I know the city is working, and we talked earlier that they've got 7 applicants.
Yes.
Is there any thought that once the city has made their decision, that those people should be approached?
We'll get their leftovers.
Well,
That's you guys. Do you want us to ask them to share?
it's a
No, I
thought.
think that's a good
I'm
idea.
putting
No,
a thought on the table.
No, I think it's a good idea.
I don't
We can
know.
approach them.
I don't know exactly how I got appointed, but I applied for the Colorado Springs job role and was given El Paso County, so. I guess I agree.
Jen? Jen?
I do not understand why they all of a sudden changed their process, and Tamara's not. She has to interview again?
Are they making you interview again?
That is not, that is absurd.
We have been telling them that since I started in October.
Can we write a note and?
I would strongly encourage Jim or any of you who run into our council members to give them a nudge and ask them why. It's been on hold for so long, and they've never done that before. It's always been if the member is interested, they get reappointed. You are correct. This is absolutely different, and we have no idea why. And we have been nagging the council members and the president for months.
Can we make a resolution?
Yeah, why not that?
This is really, first of all, I
What-
think it's kind of rude. Second, I think it's kind of absurd.
Well, I did say if there's other people who are interested in this 7, that's great, and I don't have to.
But we like having you on here because your experience is helpful.
More that more people get the opportunity. as
What,
well.
all right.
You know, we get more people involved, this kind of spreads word and more awareness, so I do encourage that, so that's what I've told city council. I'm just on here until they tell me
Stop
Well,
coming.
hold on, let me ask, Jen, how would you frame the resolution?
First of all, they haven't done anything, and she was willing to serve. And second, it's the first time they've done something like that, which I think is a little bit of a discourager for new people. I mean, we've always just been able to, if the member is serving well and participating and representing the city or the county, whatever our constituency is, for them not to have, allow us to re-up somebody for a second term. It's really not fair to the participant because they're thinking, okay, do I run for an office, do I not run for an office?
Well, and it takes so long to get familiar with what's going on that to lose that continuity, you know, because it takes at least a good year to get up to speed.
Vince and then Kevin.
Yeah, we had a program a while back about diversity. We don't have a very diverse group here. Is there any way to encourage that or do something in a positive manner towards diversity to bring in folks from different chambers and whatever else? Can we do anything positive at all?
We actually do. We reach out to the Elpmar Foundation, which runs several different groups to help attract into the community and in community engagement. And they actually help us promote our openings. We also...
Bring an email to Theo Gregory, so if that's the guy you're working with.
I go through staff,
Yeah.
but I go through Miss Magic, but
Another possible source could be Leadership Pikes Peak.
we go through Leadership Pikes Peak, we go through Colorado Springs Leadership Institute. We also communicate with all of the local chambers and ask them to share it in their newsletters, both the chamber and EDC, the Black Chamber, the Women's Chamber, and the Tri-Lakes Chamber, so that we try to get a wide range.
Hold on, Kevin and then Bob.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that the board communicate to the city council that we would strongly encourage that Tamara Dipner be reappointed.
Letter of endorsement, basically?
Do we have a second? Do we have a second for the motion?
That's what I was going to,
Okay.
we can be proactive.
Okay.
If she wants to. If she votes no, then I review.
I'll go from voting.
Well, I think, okay, let me, if you will trust me to work with Jessica on framing something that we could send to, actually, I would like to go to the president, is it president of council?
Yeah. And we'll get that sent over before next week's
Sort
interviews.
of shut off some of that. But president of council, but I think we've got a natural ally in Andy and some of the other members that are represented on the council governance board. That said, let's come back to what you really wanted, which is who would be interested in serving? We don't know exactly what the schedule's going to be yet because we haven't gone out for candidates. But would anyone be interested in serving, or do I need to start calling around and calling in debts or things like that? Jen?
I'll serve too.
Okay, so I've got Kevin and Jen. Anybody else? And Sharon.
Okay.
I think that's plenty, and thank you all very much.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Any update on Green Mountain Falls Monument, Palmer Lake?
We continue to harass them regularly. Bethany is doing her very best to get them to send us a representative. They have said, we've got someone. They turned us down. So we continue to work on it, and if you have connections in those communities, please feel free to encourage them to reach out to Bethany to help get them appointed.
Do you go to the board members, or do you go to
We do.
Okay, and they just go,
Typically, they say, we're working on so-and-so, or someone has an idea, and that goes as you would anticipate.
My recollection is that this has been a long-standing problem.
We had talked, in fact, there was a discussion, and I can't remember whether it was in this group or it was when when Kevin was leading some of the discussions about the CAC and things, about maybe trying to do something where we could invite some of the community leadership in from those, all areas, but with emphasis on them as well, into some sort of an evening social thing or late afternoon social thing, where we would be talking about what goes on here, what PPACG does, what the Community Advisory Committee does, and try to raise their awareness some more, because one of the pushbacks that I've been hearing, and maybe I'm making this up at night, but is that they don't see a value for them in coming down the pass or coming down I-25 from the north part of the county. Yes, sir.
Piggyback on that idea, Council of Neighbors and Organizations does hold kind of receptions like that for education purposes. If you would like, I could contact Kono, and they have a pretty good pull of the local city council and the local county commissioners, and that could then basically draw the other entities in.
I would be all in favor if you want to, you and I can work together on making something like that happen.
You send me something of what you're looking for, and I'll go talk to some people.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we took care of that one. Jessica McMullen is next up.
I know. You're shocked to hear from me again. The Colorado Open Records Act requires that all public records be open for inspection by any person at reasonable times. Our board of directors did ask us to look at the policy that we have in place, which is none, the policy that our member governments have, and comparable governments. The things that influence Cora fees relate to number of staff members, amount of time available, difficulty in obtaining information, and expectation that information will be easily available. So most of our local governments, you'll notice pretty much everybody says, you can have an hour of free staff time, we'll print you up to 20 pages, but beyond that, you have to start paying for it. These policies came into place because of something that is generally referred to as media phishing, where people would send a request for an obscenely large amount of information or very, very broad requests. Staff would spend hours and hours and hours providing it, and it would be used just looking for trouble and never actually be used. While we want to be transparent, and that is a very, very important principle of PPACG, it's equally important that our time be valued and that we are able to provide our day jobs in addition to media requests and open record requests. So we reviewed those member entities, we compared. Staff, me, is recommending that we do a policy that is in line with all of our member governments, which is up to 20 hours and 1 hour of time free. Yeah. 20 pages, 1 hour. With additional pages being 25 cents and $30 per additional hour, requiring a deposit of the estimated cost if it's going to be over $10. And this is ideally to bring us in line with all of our member governments, as well as to have a thing in place.
Questions? Julie?
First, I'd like to thank Jessica and Bethany for getting back to me on my questions about this, because when I see 25 cents a page, and I know I can go to a coffee shop and get something for 7 cents, I was curious about how much it costs PPACG for a page of information, and the answer is less than 1 cent. So, to me, as our government should be serving us, media or not, it seems a little outrageous that we would take something to that extent. I would argue, although it's member government should come down in price, and that we should charge maybe what the state does, because it's 0.06 cents according to the contract for a page. Charging 25 cents.
There's utilities though.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not just paper and ink, it's utilities, it's the person's time. I mean, there's a lot
Time
more
is
that goes
separate.
into it.
Time is $30 an hour, which sorry, we're paying, and I understand the benefits and the insurance. That's paid for then, but a
Right,
page copying
It's time they're no longer able to spend on their primary job.
$30 an hour. Why do we have to charge a fee to pay for it? It's discouraging accessibility, public access, transparency. That's what I was looking at there.
Typically, we are able to provide all information that people want electronically. I have thus far, in my 6 months here, printed nothing, which is how I think we adjust that. I think having the cost is fair, because if we do have to print it, we are taking the printer away from everybody else in the building. We don't have multiple printers like the state would. We are taking staff time to both maintain it, update it, and we're already offering them 20 pages free. Again, staff perspective. And whereas the time, we're only going to charge them if it takes us more than an hour. And to be honest, I'm probably not going to charge them unless it takes me more than 3. But that's going to be off policy and more discretion. And that's because we don't want to be charging people for these things. But if I'm printing 100 pages, that's going to take up an hour of my time just straight for the printing. I'm not charging you for the time I spent babysitting a printer. I'm not charging you for the time Bethany sits babysitting a printer. I'm trying to make sure that we give you the best information we can at the lowest cost possible and in the fastest variety possible.
I think it's a completely reasonable policy to balance giving people access without being, having your time and the public's time and money wasted on frivolous requests, which is the whole point of it.
Okay, let's do Vince and then Jen.
Why are we talking about this?
Yeah.
The Board of Directors asked us to create a CORA policy.
And why is the CAC involved in it?
Everything comes to the CAC before it goes to the board. We need your opinion. What does the community think? Other
Community
than
thinks different
Area
things.
Agency on Aging,
That's okay.
I would tell you that what Julie said was not raised at the TAC.
and that's why we have this. That's why I want you guys to hear it. I want Julie's opinion. I want to have that perspective of why are we charging for paper at all? If we're charging them for time, why are we charging them for paper? So
Okay.
it's helpful.
Jen?
I'm just, when, other than I suspect around the whole dismissal of the executive director and all that stuff that happened in our recent past as far as PPACG, when in the past has there been this wildly investigative interest in PPACG business, since all of it's on the website and all of the meetings are on the website? I don't understand that. Is that the most recent case?
The
Documentation?
I am not sure if the board requested it as a reaction to December's events or simply being aware that they're currently reviewing a lot of the policies and procedures, including the bylaws and the personnel handbook. And I think it was brought to their attention that we don't have one and that we should. That this policy brings us in line with the state, CDOT, all of our member governments, and sets up a chance for us to say, here's how we look at this in a fair and open way.
I guess I probably, the whole 25 cents a piece of paper is the most absurd thing I've ever heard of, because you print one for almost nothing, and you can send it electronically. After an hour or 2 hours of staff time, you dig stuff up, maybe something coming up with an hourly rate, but I just, tax-paying public already paid and take, we give taxes to PPACG for all this stuff to happen. So if I want to find out a detail on a subject that I may have missed that wasn't on the public website, which would be rare since everything is, and first of all, we didn't even match Colorado Springs on this stuff, right? Colorado Springs, you get 2 hours of free time. It costs you $20 per additional hour. And then we've decided to go with the higher expense.
And Fountain is half an hour, and some of them are,
Fountain's pretty skinny, the number of people.
and we don't have a lot of staff. And that's part of where we looked at it, is what organizations are we most comparable to.
Okay, Hal?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this so that we can get to specific amendments if needed.
Second, do I hear for a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion, specifically of the motion and the specifics on there. And Julie, do you have an alternative number that you would like to see in there?
Oh, I understand the need, especially what you're saying, Michelle, staff time and that, and need to cover your job. The fact that you haven't faced this particularly, other than having to cover it electronically, I would suggest we bring the cost down to 7 cents, just out of respect for the taxpaying public, as was mentioned by Denver. It is what the state is.
Well, I don't know. Before we, because that, if we're going to do that, we're going to need an amendment motion. But let me ask a question. It's along the line of Jen's. How many FOI or Cora requests do we receive on average?
Situationally depends on what's going on. In my time here, we've had some months where we've had upwards of 20 and some months where we've had 2. I've not yet had a month where I did not have any. I have had none from citizens. They have all been from media, which I think does offer a different perspective.
What about the 11 by 17 pages? What about color documents? What about all of those things? How do you throw those in there as well? Because you want a replica of whatever you're given, and you just don't give them black and white. So that's a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Not,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Jump in here.
So I did ask, it's about 4 cents, no, it's .042 for a color copy, so it's 4 cents a page.
Never gotten that on our business.
It's cheaper?
I find the number.
I need the name of this copy.
Yeah, I actually.
Is that
Get out of here.
I don't know. I don't know who's coming up with those estimates of costs. I'm not as concerned about it because I'm intrigued that the state says 7 cents, and that's an interesting number to have arrived at there. Let me just share a little bit of my perspective because I was at the birth of the Freedom of Information Act, which ultimately led to Cora and across the states and things. And I think Jessica's comment about where these requests are coming from is important in terms of the difference between a private citizen asking for specific information and media who are, sometimes they're fishing, sometimes they have a legitimate interest in trying to pursue something. And from the, this is going to be a little yin and a little yang. From the other point of view, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're getting a wave of requests, they're usually about the same topic.
Typically.
Typically. I mean, you're going to get everything from KOAA and from the Gazette and everybody. They all want to know about what happened with the executive director, okay, just for discussion purposes. I don't know how many times you have to research that, frankly. But somewhere that rolls in, and we're doing 1 hour free for something like that. Somewhere along the line, some of that cost has to be recovered. I would be inclined for something less than 25 cents, but I'm not sure I'd drop it clear down to 7. And I can't tell you why that, I'm in that middle kind of ground, but that's, everything else I'm fine with, I think. And I don't vote, by the way.
Just like a follow-up, the numbers are supposedly right out of contract.
Yeah.
that They have, so, yes, you can find it, it is the business. The 7
Not
cents
core of that.
for myself, that's what I expect to pay when I go to the coffee shop. So that, I don't know that they went to a coffee shop, so
Yeah.
7, 8 cents.
It's usually 10 if
Yeah,
you're
it's usually
paying for
10.
a public
Yeah.
copy.
Black and white.
Black and white only.
Correct. Color.
8.5 by 11 only.
Somebody got a heck of a contract there.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Julie?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I've been on the other side of the receiving end of Cora requests in my business, and I can tell you that there have been times when I have been asked for information by attorneys, not by the media, that involved 4 and 5 and 6 and 700 pages of information that I had to copy. And so it does happen, and you do have to provide it, and happy to provide it. But there are times when it can get ugly, and it only takes one time of 1,000 pages or 2,000 pages, and you can't not make sure that you're covering those costs because it's not fair for people to do that when they are fishing. So I would give you that perspective as well.
And are you in support of the motion?
I'd consider dropping it, but I don't like the 7 cents either.
Tamara?
Curious, other than the state, everyone else is pretty consistent with what you are wanting to do. Is it maybe a possibility for us to try what you're proposing for a year and see how that works out and then revisit it? It just must be some reason all the other counties and cities are having the same system. So before we do a drop in prices, it might be worthwhile just trying it for a year and see if that discourages media from fishing, or if you get complaints from citizens who feel like this is, cost prohibitive for them. I think that might be something we could try and see.
I mean, kind of like a sunset clause. Let's try it and see how it works.
Yeah.
I would suggest that takes $30 of staff time to probably cover that next year.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Julie?
I was going to say, 25 cents is the maximum allowed under state statute. So that's where that max, that's why nobody's charging more. Because nobody's charging so much.
But I'm wondering if they've had some experiences where maybe this prevents this fishing, and so it's worked, so they're charging it their maximum, but it just discourages some frivolous inquiries and requests, because honestly, if I were taxpayer or anyone else, they have their own workload to do, but having to stop doing that and do this for just frivolous requests because it's inexpensive, I think that's a waste of taxpayers' resources. And I think maybe there's a reason that everyone else except state of Colorado is doing this, and let's find out what that is, and then give it a year and see, and then we can.
Well, yeah, and I would say electronics has changed the entire perspective on these issues since the Freedom of Information Act was passed in the mid-'70s. So it's a different world out there right now. Jen?
Are we, Jessica, do you bill them if they just want an electronic copy?
No,
No, it's
So is that?
This is for paper.
this is only for if they ask me, can you print this out and give it to me?
and it's over 20 pages.
Is that in here, that electronic copies are?
Did you spend as much time?
I don't know if it's under the Cora specification, but I don't know anybody who has ever charged for electronic. You just don't do it. If you've got the file, I send it.
Time is time.
Yeah.
Right.
No, we're already saying 0 for the first hour, so. All right, we have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. I have not heard an amendment offered.
Would the motion maker accept an amendment to 15 cents? $0.16? No, 15 cents.
I understand all of the discussion, and I'm torn. I don't think that this proposed recommendation is out of bounds. Could we change it? Yes. I'm resistant to that
Okay.
amendment.
Acceptable.
If there is, however, if there are other amendments, please bring them up.
Okay. Do I hear a specific motion for amendment?
I'll try it. I say we accept this for in the condition that we try for a year and then revisit it next year, and with feedback from staff, how this works out, feedback complaints from citizens, because I do understand your point too. But let's see if there are citizens who are wanting information and feeling like this is, versus media always wanting it. So that is the terrible amendment, but.
Would it be helpful if we just gave you guys a report in December of every year that talks about how many requests we get and what they look like, page and time-wise? Because I don't think we even need an amendment for that. You guys just direct the staff that you'd like to see that every year, and I can help you.
There's no data, really.
Right.
To make us-
And admittedly, I am new enough that data that may have existed in the past is no longer in my brain, because I wasn't here.
Right.
Has this been placed in front of or reviewed by the PPACG board or the administrative
Moving up.
process?
The TAC saw it, the Technical Advisory Committee. The managers have seen it. The board will see it on June 14th. It goes to you guys first, so you can.
I accept, well, I don't know that we need
I don't think
a specific amendment. We need a review process, and that sounds like it's been committed to,
Okay. So
in my opinion.
the motion is to accept the proposed fee schedule, and it's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have two, Julie and Kevin and Jen.
And we will make sure that we bring those up to the board when we present this to them, and the discussion points about whether the amount is appropriate, as well as how that plays out in its effectiveness for representing citizens.
Well, I
And
think
you
the
need to bring
minutes
up
should show we
electronics.
had an extended discussion about the actual cost to reproduce the piece.
As for my biggest objection is lack of data, making a decision with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob?
Some ancient history, there was a motion made by Kevin, seconded by me, if you could vote on it. I have that on good authority.
I'm sorry, was that the motion for 15 cents?
No,
What?
it was the one about,
Yes, right?
To have a sunset.
I'm sorry.
this
what
was
did
a
we
couple
miss?
items ago.
Oh,
Oh, to support Tamara.
oh.
It was to,
We're
The
gonna- I
the
thought
chair
we-
wiped us out.
I thought we decided I was going to communicate
Yeah,
to
the
the
chair
city.
rejected our motion.
oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're ornery today.
You know,
Okay.
holy pulpit is
I'm
All
good
right,
with that.
let's, all right. In the interest of pure and unsullied process,
I'm going to vote against
there
it
is
now.
a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded, that we communicate on behalf of the CAC to the city, appropriate agency in the city, supporting Tamara's continuity on this committee. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
Yes, and Tamara abstained. All right. Thank you very much. See, that's that history, having been a chair, you know, I've got two former chairs sitting in here, keeping an eye on me. Okay. Jennifer, you're up again.
Hello again, Jennifer Valentine, Transportation Planner with PPACG. So I think last time you heard from me, other than about an hour ago, I was here talking about our goals for the plan. And even though it seems like a long time ago, I guess you haven't heard what happened at the last board meeting. So the board did approve the list of, so the vision statement and the list of 5 goals. They made 2 what we would call relatively minor changes to the goals. Is there a way to? So in the first goal, you'll see, or you won't see in green, in green text. It's also in your packet. All right, I will read it for you. So goal 1, maintenance and operations. Improve the efficiency, condition, and new words, economically sustainable, and new words, operations of the existing transportation network, including roads, transit, and non-motorized facilities. So they wanted to add the phrase economically sustainable. Or they did, because they're approved. No changes to goals 2, 3, and 4. Goal 5 now reads, improve competitiveness of the regional economy and residents' quality of life through strategic transportation investments, new words, and integrated transportation technology. So the goals that appear in your packet are the goals that have been approved by the board. So that was just an update on that. So when we talk about the goals, objectives, and targets, we really lump them together because they're so intertwined, but it's such a big task to come up with all of it that we have to break it off into pieces, so it's a multi-month exercise. So now we have the goals settled, and so the next thing we did was we had a workshop with our Transportation Advisory Committee on May 11th, and we optimistically thought, we're going to knock out these objectives and targets today. We had a really good discussion with the group. One thing that came out was, and staff completely agreed, that we really need to be clear about what data we have, what can we actually measure, and just being realistic about it. In the past, there have been objectives and targets that we didn't have the data to measure, or maybe we weren't able to go back and look at our base year and figure out how much progress we've made or haven't made. We didn't look at past trends, so maybe, again, we were optimistic that we could improve the condition of our bridges, for example, over the next 20 years, when perhaps over the past 20 years they've been degrading. So maybe we sound a little bit cynical, but we're trying to be more realistic this time around. So like I said, that was the clear message from the TAC, and staff definitely agrees. So how we spent our time at that workshop was really focusing on the objectives. So what do we want to accomplish? And then staff came away with a whole bunch of homework and data collection. Before we can even start looking at targets, we need to go back and look at those trends, what's been happening over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years. What data do we have? We don't want to come up with targets that we don't have the data to actually back up and measure. So what you have in your packet is a very, very rough draft. If something offends you, it's probably going to change. I'm happy to take comments at this point, but just know that we had a lot to get through at that first meeting. So we did go through under each goal and try to at least carve out the main topic areas for the objectives. In particular, the items that you see in red text on the screen anyway, are very rough and are still being discussed. So staff came away with a lot of homework, but also TAC members, specific TAC members had homework. Brian Vituli, for example, from Mountain Metro is getting us a lot of information about what transit data do they collect, what do they want to measure in the coming years. So our plan going forward is just to work with a lot of these other agencies and also see what historical data we have. So one example, kind of the loosest goal at this point for us, is the last one, the economic vitality goal. And so last Friday I met with the Chamber and EDC to start brainstorming what information do they have, how can we actually measure, economic vitality and quality of life and things like that. And they were really excited to work with us, and so they have some homework too. I think that's about all I wanted to say. So we are hoping to have a second TAC workshop by the end of June, but it's just really important that we come in with the information to have informed targets. Questions, comments?
Did we have anybody from here at the TAC workshop?
I don't think so.
Were we invited? Could we have someone at least, let us know, and that there will be when the next workshop's scheduled? Because we have some folks, normally I'm the one that's going to attend the TAC meetings, but I think it would be helpful just to hear that interaction.
Yeah, and then we could have some continuity between the groups as well. Yeah, we're not calling these special meetings, we are calling them workshops, so it's probably anyone could come. I don't know how that works. Yeah.
We have a workshop coming up next week.
The scenario planning workshop. So that's all happening at the same time. But yeah.
Now, how does that fit? How does this mesh together with what you're showing us today?
Yeah. So the goals, objectives, and targets apply under any scenario.
Thank you. Question, Jen?
I have a question about, on goal number 3, the performance target. I'm trying to understand what the relationship is, the increased number of residences within a quarter mile of a transit stop. Because some transit stops are somebody is getting off on one and getting on another, that kind of stuff, which is totally unrelated. How do they collect the data?
Yeah, so we actually had a long discussion at the workshop about this one. Basically, they want to make sure that their stops are in the right places, that they're actually serving areas that are that have a significant draw, that people want to get on the bus at that location. Residences is typically what's measured as opposed to businesses. I mean, you have the trip origin and the destination, but they just want to make sure that the stops are accessible for people. They don't really expect that people are going to walk further than a quarter of a mile to get to the stop. I understand that there are transfers in non-residential areas like the downtown center, for example, but this is just in particular looking at if somebody wants to get on the bus, can they do it within a reasonable distance of their house?
How do they determine demand?
They do onboard rider surveys pretty regularly.
That only targets current ridership. What about people that would potentially be interested in using it if it was more accessible?
Yeah, there are potentially other measures. I mean, for any of these goals, and then we have some of the objectives are kind of by mode, some of them are not, but for any of these, we could have, 10 different targets, but we really have to try and be strategic about which ones we use if we actually have the data and what's important for us to measure. So I would say that this isn't the final list, because we didn't even, the reason we have this potential performance target here is because, Brian was sitting next to us at the meeting and he had an idea and we didn't want to lose it.
Okay, well, I think having the opportunity to sit in on the next workshop will be very valuable.
Yeah, when we set the date for that, we'll either let you or the whole group know.
Are we scaring Ken off? No.
I'm almost ready.
Maybe he dropped his pencil, I don't know.
Are you going to be Kevin here in a few minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, fortunately I'm not today.
You're not, that's good. Okay, thank you for that. How many people are going to be participating in the scenario workshop next week? Okay, good. That's good representation. I'm sorry? Okay.
You can still come even if you didn't raise your hand, so.
The information is out there. It's Thursday,
June 8th.
2 and 4.
2 to 4. Yeah, I'll be sending out the agenda and a couple other pieces of information within the next day or so. So if you were on the original list, you'll probably still see it.
Okay. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
We have a special program overview. Carrie Schillinger. Is it Schillinger or Schillinger?
You nailed it. Very impressive.
Schillinger.
Schillinger. Yeah, no, well, Henry Kissinger ruined it for me because everyone thinks it's Schillinger, but
Okay.
Schillinger or Schillinger. All right. So, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to speak to you today. I am Carrie Schillinger, as we've established. At the Area Agency on Aging, I actually have an office right across the wall there, and so I am often eavesdropping on your meetings. So it's nice to be part of one for a change. I want to talk to you, and I'll try and make it brief, but that's not my strong suit. So I want to talk to you today about the Area Agency on Aging, what we do, why we do it, who we serve, and who we partner with to do that. So if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt, and we'll have time for questions at the end as well. So PPACG is the Area Agency on Aging in this part of the state, and we are chartered with helping older adults remain independent by removing barriers to that independence. We want them to remain in their communities, which doesn't necessarily mean living independently in their own freestanding home. It might mean living with adult children. It might mean living in assisted living instead of skilled nursing because there's more independence there. But our goal is to help as many people 60 and older in El Paso, Park, and Teller counties remain as independent as possible for as long as possible. And we do not means test. In other words, we can't ask you what your income is and then determine whether we're going to deliver services based on how many dollars are in your bank account. If you're 60 or older, and if you live in one of our 3 counties, we will serve you. We may have a waiting list for some of our services, but we'll get to you as we rotate through the waiting list. And we do ask for and welcome contributions. That's part of the requirement from both the federal and the state government, so we are good about that. If you notice when you go through the lobby, there's a wooden donation box out there. that's locked and has envelopes and gives people the opportunity to make that donation right here, but we receive them in the mail as well. And this is a little mind-numbing, so I will simply point out that the hierarchy of the system starts at the federal level with the now administration on community living. And there are, I know it's confusing that there are over 50 state units on aging, but that's because we also have a state unit on aging based in Puerto Rico and in Guam and in the Mariana Islands, et cetera, and over 600 area agencies on aging providing services through every single county and territory in the United States. And that includes 16 area agencies on aging in Colorado. Most of them, I believe 12 of the 16 serve multi-county areas. The poor folks in Denver, I think, have 8 counties. We only have 3, but we have some very differing geographies, as you well know. And there are 4 area agencies on aging in the north central part of the state that are one-county entities only. And they have a very different kind of environment to work in because they only have to wrestle with basically one government entity when it comes to, in other words, they don't have to cross county lines for service delivery, which can sometimes be a challenge. The administration for community living, strategic priorities are to empower older adults, to enable them to remain in their homes or communities as long as possible through home community-based services, including supports for family caregivers, which I know is sort of this tiny little phrase down here, but that I am discovering as my parents' age is a really important role for the area agencies on aging to play, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also want to help prevent abuse and neglect, and our long-term care ombudsman program speaks to that. And we're hoping everyone stays active and healthy through as many of the programs that we're able to fund and provide locally as possible. This data from a 5-year sample from 2008 to 2012 is pretty impressive when you think about the population of the United States, that the Aging Network, which is all those state units on aging, the Administration for Community Living, and all the AAAs all together serve an average of 11 million people per year, and that data is now 5 years old. So you can imagine it's significantly more. But I want to highlight that the 2 most important services, and we see this consistently across the country, are rides and meals. So giving people the independence that transportation provides when they stop driving, and giving them access to good nutrition so that they can be as healthy as possible are the 2 most important things that the Older Americans Act delivers to our community older adults. And more mind-numbing statistics, but I want to point out the third one down, that 42% of the folks who use transportation services, that's their only transportation. And I think that's really significant, especially when we look at the transportation challenges that exist in this service area that we cover. Park County, their real estate is huge. And so to deliver a ride in Park County costs significantly more than it costs to deliver a ride in Colorado Springs. And so there's always a fine balance to be considered when it comes to allocating dollars to all the different service providers, because as you can see, folks that rely on that transportation, it's their only way to get around, a large percentage of them. So in that same 5-year period that was surveyed, you can see in Colorado there were almost 2 million rides and over 9 million meals provided. So we are very proud of the small role that we play in that when you aggregate all of the Colorado statistics together, but still pretty impressive. So internally, what do? We have, and I've put these brochures out at the table, so feel free to grab them on your way out. We have a Family Caregiver Support Center, which provides a number of programs to caregivers and care recipients, and only one of the people in that dynamic is required to be 60. So you can be 45, but as long as your parent who you are helping remain in their home is 60 or older, we're glad to help you. We have education through the Family Caregiver Support Center. We have counseling and respite care vouchers, so that if you are a family caregiver, you can get a voucher through our program, and you can have a certified nurse come to your house and deliver medications to your loved one and stay with them so that you can go to the doctor or perhaps have some recreational time and go to lunch with a friend and get a break, because all of those little things help restore your ability to be a caregiver. The Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program is also administered through our area agency on aging. In some parts of the state, they are more standalone. In other parts of the country, do things differently. The ombudsman visit every single skilled nursing facility in our region a minimum of once a month, and every single assisted living a minimum of once a quarter. They advocate for the residents. They follow up on reports of neglect and abuse within those residences. They engage the police and adult protective services where necessary. And they are fantastic. Our lead long-term care ombudsman was recognized 1.5 years ago at a national conference for his advocacy. He was head and shoulders above anybody else in the country that year, and Scott Bartlett is a real asset to this community. Our senior insurance program, we are the state health insurance program for this 3-county region. SHIP is what it's called, so if you ever hear anybody speaking that acronym, you're not hearing a bad word on the fly. We are the SHIP office in addition to senior insurance in general. And through that program, we serve more than just the 3 counties that PPACG covers. We have an additional 6 counties that our insurance counselors are responsible for. So they take some of those clients over the telephone through phone calls, but they do go and visit some of those counties as well. And if you've ever come to a CAC meeting in our open enrollment period and walked through the lobby in October, November, December, you've seen the senior insurance program in high gear as they help everybody change their drug plans in that window of time in the fall. And our most robust program is the Senior Information and Assistance Program. And through that program, we have a direct contract with Lifeline for those medallions or wristbands that you wear if you're living independently and you want to have that emergency call if you fall or if you fear you're having a heart attack in the middle of the night. We also provide vouchers for personal care and home care to help people remain in their homes longer, case management for filling out Medicaid applications and accessing resources. And then hopefully everybody has seen the Yellow Book before. And the Yellow Book is our pride and joy. We publish that once a year. We've been doing it now for over 35 years, I believe. Continuously, it is, I think, quite possibly the most robust resource published in the country amongst AAAs. Certainly in the state of Colorado, over 600 individual resources listed there, and a point of pride for us, as I seem to be hung up on. So, additionally, I will just highlight one other thing or 2 other things in our Information and Assistance Center. The Network of Care is a website that you can go to that actually has all of the individual listings from the Yellow Book and many, many more, and a lot of other information, including how to track legislation that affects older adults. And then lastly, that adult Medicaid programs and veterans benefits book, which is currently out of print, as we like to say, in production in the final stages. It's going to go to the printer, I think, sometime this week. Excellent. So we will have a new one. We distribute those statewide. The Yellow Book only goes to our 3 counties, but the Medicaid and Veterans Book goes statewide and is used by case managers and folks who help older adults by helping them understand what the program definitions are each year, because they change. So we also contract locally with a number of providers to provide all of these different services that we are not able to provide. So, for instance, we're not qualified to test your hearing and give you a hearing aid, but we fund Peak Vista, and they do that. And we are also no good at dental cleaning. That's way outside of my wheelhouse. So Senior Mobile Dental, who's located now with an office and no longer quite so mobile, up on Hancock by the Senior Center, does that. And additionally, we have, we play a role in providing meals through Silver Keys Golden Circle Nutrition Program, their transportation program, transportation in Teller County and in Park County as well, and a variety of other programs. And these are all of the agencies with which we contract to provide those services. So in closing, because that's a lot of information to digest, just the highlights and the most important pieces to take away are that you need only be 60 or older and a resident of El Paso, Park, or Teller counties to come to us. And if there's something that we can't help with, we know who in town to help. Although sometimes we get stumped. So when we do, we try and refer someone to the correct place. We got a call earlier this week for someone who was submitting paperwork for recertifying or renewing, I guess, their green card. And they couldn't afford the fee that went with it. And they were looking for a nonprofit that provided funding for that. So we scrambled, and the first referral we gave them was the one that had them call us. So we scrambled and got them another one, and I think they were able to get what they needed. But if we don't know what to do, we will try and find the person who does.
Bob, are you going to speak for our cohort?
Hey, I'm 60.
I'd just like to know, I'm seeing a lot of information and referral in what you do, and what has happened to 211?
211, which is a program of the Pikes Peak United Way, as far as I know, is still operational. We no longer fund 211. We haven't. This is the end of the first fiscal year, I believe, where we have not funded them, and they did not apply for funding in the coming fiscal year of 2018. So I think we will see what happens with 211 after a new executive director is installed over at United Way, and hopefully that executive director will have a vision for 211 moving forward. I think when JD was there, his vision was that United Way supported 211, and when Jason Wood came on board, his vision was that 211 be self-sustaining. And I think that change was problematic for the staff. I know they had a lot of turnover, and so hopefully the new direction from the new ED will help define what happens next. It's a very valuable community resource, and we used to get calls from them all the time. 211 told me to call you, so.
Aubrey?
Do you play any role in informing policy that would make any of these services less necessary?
We do not advocate at the state legislature. Dr. Cog has lobbyists on staff, and they have a very robust AAA, as you can imagine. They are the largest. We're the second largest in the state. And as a result, their lobbyist and their AAA director are very closely connected. And so their lobbyist, by the name of Rich Morrow, traditionally advocates for the entire network of 16 area agencies on aging when he's at the state capitol. So we're really fortunate in that we derive benefit from that. And the area agency on aging directors meet as a group once a quarter, and they share ideas. And so at those meetings, in addition to email threads and phone calls, they're able to inform the AAA director in Denver of what the group as a whole would like to see for the state. And then she's able to work with Rich, and he then carries that on up the food chain.
How about at the local level?
No, not at the local level. There's a tricky bit in the regulations where we are not allowed to go directly and advocate or lobby. So we are charged with being advocates, and then we are handcuffed. and limited on how we can advocate. So at the local level, I think what we'll see is when the Colorado Springs Commission on Aging is established, I think we'll see some action taken by that group locally with the city and county governments, hopefully. But certainly with the city, because it'll be a city committee. But not at this time yet. Yes?
What is your budget, where do you get your money, and how many people do you actually have working for you?
Our budget is, I want to say, about $4.2 million for fiscal year 2017, the one that we're just ending. It is almost exclusively Older Americans Act funds from the federal government and Older Coloradans Act funds from the state, both of which are funneled through the Colorado State Unit on Aging. So we actually only submit to one entity for reimbursement, but it's two different funding streams. Our Senior Insurance Assistance Program gets additional funding from SHIP, from the State Health Insurance Program Office, which I believe is under DORA. And then every now and then we will have additional grant funds. We had some funding from the Colorado Health Foundation a couple of years ago. So sometimes we're fortunate and get a little bit of extra dollars. But sustainability-wise, it's primarily Older Americans Act, Older Coloradans Act, and SHIP that provides the funding. We have 13 people on staff right now, I believe, 3 long-term care ombudsmen, 3 of us on the admin team, and everybody else is in the direct services group. Quick, Jessica, what's the population of older adults in the 3 county service? I don't know the answer to the question. I'm sorry. Sorry?
About 800,000, I think.
No, that's all
No,
old
for
people?
for older adults.
Population.
Yeah.
Very old.
Not that old.
So not enough is the answer. Not enough money for the adults.
One last question, Tamara.
On the radio, I heard this morning that with the announcement and I thought about it. I thought, well, that's a good, I think that's great. Then I wondered what happens after that. Are that person that put in a safe place? Maybe because beyond the scope, but I was curious. What happens after you report? Do you get involved in that? Do you have social workers that work one-on-one with that?
It's a really good question, because when you're putting information like that out into the public, people end up with questions just like yours. What happens next? So recent legislation passed, I believe, in 2015, but it could have been 2014, established minimum mandatory requirement reporting for abuse and neglect. And so now, instead of simply reporting it internally to the facility, to the administration, now there's a mandatory law enforcement reporting requirement. And so if there is suspected abuse, it is a call to the police department, and they have a special unit, and the county is also responding to this and has added to the sheriff's department dedicated staff whose responsibility is to visit, interview the individual, and then advocate for them to be in a safe situation. If it's a family member that's coming to the facility and abusing that individual, then they can block the family member from visiting. If it's something that's taking place in the home, then that's completely different. And every situation is unique. When necessary, our long-term care ombudsmen become involved. They've been responsible over the years, actually. I would like to say it was the summer of 2016, but it could have been the summer before, where they were responsible for having the license of an assisted living facility in Colorado Springs examined very closely by the state, and the state ultimately pulled the license for the facility because of the evidence that they received of abuse of the residents there. And then the long-term care ombudsman got involved helping to relocate those folks into other facilities. So sometimes they get involved on the periphery. But all of those calls for abuse are police department or sheriff's deputies' calls.
Including financial.
Yes, financial exploitation. And now financial advisors are also mandatory reporters, as are bank tellers. If If you see somebody coming and repeatedly making withdrawals that make no sense, that's a reportable issue.
I think that's because my initial thought was we report it, and then that individual is now in an additional vulnerable place.
Right, because now they have a target on their back for having spoken up. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Gary, thank you very much. That's been
Thank
very
you
helpful.
for the
And
opportunity.
I know my wife works with your counterpart ship back on the East Coast in support of some member of her family, so
Fantastic.
it's been very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're back.
It's me, and I'm sorry. Okay, super quick update on the legislative session. Thank God it ended May 10th. I didn't say that. We're all very sorry to hear that the legislative session has ended. They have selected not to do a special session, which was in debate at the initial end of the session. They feel like there's not enough agreement on anything to actually pass anything, so there was no point in calling them back together. We tracked a total of 30 different bills with input from actually many of you on the CAC, which I really appreciate. You responded to emails, or you attended or called in to the legislative subcommittee meetings. We were able to take positions on a variety of different bills, emphasizing the importance of military installations and increasing partnerships between local governments and those installations, bills to explore transportation options, rail, automated vehicles, and access for people with disabilities. And we did oppose one bill, a transportation funding measure, which would not have addressed the needs of our region, and that bill did fail. In key issues, transportation funding, obviously, as Rocky covered earlier, Senate Bill 276 covered some of the things or claimed to address some of the transportation needs, but we are already hearing from several sources that there will be November ballot issues. John Caldera's Institute will be one of the ones who will definitely be presenting at least one, but we anticipate that there will be several as soon as those ballot titles are confirmed. You'll get information from that on me as legislative updates, because it relates. Hospital provider fee, again, as Rocky Scott mentioned, that's a really complex bill. That's 276. It did a lot. It ended up being very much like an omnibus bill where it took 30 different unrelated things and it tried to address all of them. It did pass. It will create some changes in how transportation is funded and how the state general fund looks for next year. Senior services and healthcare, the expansion of the state PACE ombudsman program. So the very services that Tamara was talking about just a little bit ago, where not only do we have, if you believe there's abuse, but if someone in a home calls and is like, the home's a jerk, our ombudsman will go and actually research that. The state did pass a bill to expand that program and increase the number of ombudsmen we'll have, which will be very helpful to the community. Any questions about the legislative session?
Okay. Thank you very much.
I talk fast.
Kevin, you've changed.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Prather, PPACG Acting Transportation Director, filling in for Kevin. He asked me to do this after I approved his vacation request. He's been keeping you informed each month for the last several months. The Transportation Advisory Committee started a review of TIP policies, and the last one to be discussed was our how to address cost overruns, and that was currently done with the not one penny extra, the NOPE policy. About in January, this task force that's been working on it, it rapidly expanded into a review of many processes and policies affecting the TIP. And that's the 17 items that you see on pages 1 and 2 of your attachment in the memo. And Kevin's got them color-coded there as to, it was kind of a think tank approach. We just threw out all kinds of ideas and then started going through and evaluating them. And so you see some have been crossed off and thrown out. And some of the others we've decided should be processes that don't require a board approval to be a policy. And then on page 3, we think we finally got it down, all condensed. It'll be coming to you next month for a recommendation to the board. But the current policy is if there's a cost overrun on a project, the local or the project sponsor is responsible for the entire cost overrun with their own funds. We're proposing that federal funds be allowed either by canceling some other project, reducing the scope of the project that has the cost overrun. So instead of putting fancy landscaping, you put bare functional landscaping. It's still a functional project, but it's not as pretty or something else that allows a cost savings. And if there's unexpected money that falls out of the sky from somewhere, sometime, that money federal money could be used for cost overruns. In addition, currently our TIPS, Transportation Improvement Programs, are 6 years long. So when somebody does a cost estimate for a project, they're having to estimate cost inflations and other issues that could affect costs 6 years out in the future. So we're proposing to that we will change the TIP to be a 4-year TIP, and that'll at least knock off 2 years of that unknown impacts. So that's what will be coming to you next month for recommendation. So what you see on page 3 will be pretty much what's there, although I'm sure there'll be some wordsmithing and tweaking going on. Jen?
I have a question about, I really do agree with everything that's in green, highlighted in green, and understand where that came from based on earlier discussion. The translation between what's in green and what's on here is very different to me. I mean, some of it's included, but and then there's these allow project sponsors to use local funds. Like, what local funds? Why didn't we use local funds in the first place?
Okay, well, they have been, so.
And then allow project sponsors to use additional money from unanticipated sources and project reconciliation. I didn't see these over in green as potential solutions, but they appeared on the following ending regulation. So I'm not sure where that leap occurred, so.
Okay, could I suggest, because there is going to be another, I think there's going to be another policy meeting to finalize this, and we will see it again next month for actual vote.
Okay.
Could I suggest, because you've attended these.
No, I've been, Kevin's attended.
Kevin's attended.
Yeah,
Well, he may have a comment here in a minute.
Reyes had suggested that Kevin had been following the whole tracking, so.
Well, I went to one of these, and I found it very helpful to hear how they were distinguishing between what was process and shouldn't be policy, and cleaned up a lot of the ideas that were on the table. I really want to look at this more closely. I'm not even sure I'm ready for, after having prepared for today.
Kevin have the answer to my question, if you can send out how it went from what's on the left to what's on the right, that would be helpful.
I don't. But I can tell you, I left the last meeting early, so there may have been some additional work done. And I'm going to look at that a lot closer as well. I can tell you that having participated in these meetings and having used the words flim-flam and made some of the people very uncomfortable in the meetings regarding the NOPE policy and the strength of that, it's my conclusion that these things kind of run in cycles. And there was a cycle where there were some local governments that were really abusing the policy, basically making low bids, getting at the top of the list, and then scooping up all the money, because even though they knew that their bids were going to be low, and they abused the well-being of the region and the other folks. I think we're kind of in the other side of the cycle at this point. I think people are working together. We've got a CAC that pays a little more attention. I think the professionals that are working on these things work a little bit closer, and we are at least in the construction industry, a hyperinflation mode that is creating all sorts of skewed problems for projects that were bid 2, 3, 4, and 5 years ago. And so I think my conclusion was that we probably don't need that note policy at this point. What was practically happening was some of the things that were happening in this anyway, where people were trying to figure out how to get their projects built by using some capital improvements funds, or going back to the taxpayers and getting some additional funds for Tabor overruns and things like that. So there were those kinds of things that were occurring anyway, and the board was looking at those. And that I think acknowledging some of these things and saying this is what's really happening, and we're watching, but they're making it work, I think I just came to the conclusion that we're probably okay lessening that whip on or the reins on that note policy. But I agree with you that there are some things in here that sort of like, well, they're not even on here, and I don't even know where they came from, and I think we should challenge that a little bit, because that makes you feel a little bit like you're getting flim-flammed again. Yeah, I will do that, and I'll see if I can get a better answer quicker.
Yeah. Local funds have been used, and that's what the note policy said. Local funds had to be used for any cost overrun. So this was done in the last, kind of written up the last 10 or 15 minutes of the work session, and so this is just kind of a quick summation of the discussion right at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, so I said, oh, jeez, Kevin's gone, let's go. So I'll pay attention.
Are you saying then that it includes the green and some pieces from the note policy?
No policy said no federal funds could be used for cost overrun. What this is proposing is that federal funds can be used, whether you cancel or a project or reduce the scope of another project, or if there's project closeouts and reconciliations, or money falls out of the sky from CDOT or from Washington, then those federal funds would be eligible to pay for cost overruns. Whereas in the past, they would not be. They could only be used for new projects.
And to clarify that, project reconciliations, there's an example of that in El Paso County with PPRTA funds, where the South Mark Sheffel project was projected to cost X number of dollars, and it came in X minus $3 million. So they actually had projected the cost at one number. It came in $3 million more. So there's now additional funds sort of sitting in the bank, and there's no point in not using them for something. And if it helps get another project finished that might have had the opposite thing happen, that's what project reconciliation is. So. Yeah, absolutely. I understand. Yeah.
Bob?
Okay. I think I sat in on the first meeting.
Yeah.
And I think the relative trust among the professionals that are engaged in this process, first of all, has increased. There were some players in there, as I heard it, Kevin, that are no longer there. And probably it's good riddance, but, I think from the professionals that are doing this, I think we get a consensus that the note policy, which was instituted to eradicate those problems, is not at this time needed because of the relative trust in the system among the professionals.
Yeah, I agree. And there's more communication. There's also some oversight. CDOT has now a whole unit that actually looks at projects that have federal funds. And correct me if I'm wrong, they actually look at that and say, wait, there's no way you're going to complete that EIS in 2 years, and so you don't say that because your project won't make it. And so there's that kind of oversight, so there's some additional resources also available. I can tell you, though, that our pushback on that note policy when this idea first came back has really, I think, precipitated some really good work on those professionals' part, so I appreciate what everybody did then.
Okay. Well, Ken, thank you very much.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, please ask Kevin. Yeah, go ahead and email Kevin any questions, and we can try to
The other
make sure.
Kevin, not this Kevin.
Yeah, And, we can get those worked into the, either response before the next meetings or definitely answer it at the next meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any announcements from the members of the committee? Sure.
PPACG Area Council of Governments Annual Report is printed and ready to go. There's a pile of them by the front door if you would like to check them out.
All right. Did everybody bring enough to carry all those publications home now? Next month, we expect there will be a TIP amendment of some kind. We'll be talking specifically about what comes out of the final TIP policy task force. We're going to get the finance overview, and Jan Martin will be joining us. And Jan has some work that she does with one of the highway programs I noted. And we'll be talking about the December meeting. Right now, the schedule would put us on December 27th, and we want to talk about if we need a December meeting, which is not a given, but if we need a December meeting, possibly moving it up to the previous week. So be aware, and we'll be talking about that on the agenda. Anything that anyone else thinks we need to have on the agenda for next month, other than the normal things? Yes, sir.
The consultants working on the I-25 PEL, the gap from Monument to Castle Rock, offered to make a presentation to PPACG, and Chairman Pico accepted that and asked them to make a presentation to the TAC, the CAC, as well as the board. So that will be on next month's agenda as well.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. We could. That sounds like it's going to be worthwhile, and we'll try to make sure that we give them adequate time, but try to stay within our appropriate.
Hope they talk fast.
Yeah, we'll get them to talk fast and bring something to eat. Okay. Anything that anybody has that's coming up that you think we need to be talking about as well? Other than that, you have a copy of the meeting schedule for the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion, a second, and we are adjourned. Well, that's the shortest one we've done since I took over.
That was good, though. We had time to discuss the stuff we needed to.